Welcome to another episode of Do You Want to Hear Something Awful? This is a special bonus episode where I get to use my higher education in psychology off of the coattails of my episodes on the Scotts and Erin Iveson's ex cheating on her. I wanted to talk about a question I hear often in my life, which is, can we actually predict cheating scientifically? And more importantly, if somebody does cheat, how do we calculate the statistical likelihood that they will cheat again? Without revealing too much about myself, as I'm trying to stay anonymous on this podcast, I will tell you that I do have higher education in research science and in psychology, and so I'm excited to really dive into this information and chat about cheaters, especially since there are so many unexpected, visible cases of it in pop culture right now. I hear people say so often, well, my partner cheated in the past, but it was totally understandable. The relationship they were in was horrible, or their partner cheated on them, so it was fine for them to cheat, and they've changed, so they would never cheat on me. Another one I hear of too is, well, I was in an abusive relationship or marriage when so-and-so got together with me, so it wasn't technically cheating, and they would never dream of cheating on me. But technically, did they cheat with me? Okay, guys, does this sound like you? Because if so, sweetie, I have got some statistics for you. In this podcast, we are going to discuss how to predict cheating based on risk factors like age, personality, attractiveness or looks, attachment style, and relationship history, as well as when and who people are most likely to cheat with. I'm going to really approach what motivates people to cheat from an evolutionary psychology and neurobiology perspective, and I'm going to end with some takeaways on my thoughts on how to apply this in your relationships, because knowledge is power, y'all. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about risk factors for cheating. First of all, the easiest predictor to find out that is incredibly objective and one of the most accurate is history. Longitudinal studies show that individuals who have cheated in a previous relationship are 3 times more likely to cheat in their next relationship compared to those who have remained historically faithful. That is because these neural pathways of justifying cheating have already been established, and so it really lowers the psychological barrier to entry to cheat on your partner. Did your partner grow up in a household where one or both parents committed infidelity? Dr. Nogales, a clinical psychologist, conducted extensive research into the long-term trauma of parental affairs and found that 55% of adult children from families impacted by parental infidelity ultimately went on to cheat in their own committed relationships. A series of studies published in the Journal of Family Issues and Personal Relationships tracked adult children of infidelity and found that individuals who grow up with knowledge that one or both of their parents cheated are 2 times more likely to commit infidelity in their own adult relationships compared to those from historically faithful households. Children from homes where their parents did not cheat and were faithful admitted to cheating on their partners at a rate of 22%. But children who came from homes where their parent did cheat admitted to cheating on their partner at a rate of 44%. So again, that's double the likelihood. The reason for this is that children of unfaithful parents will normalize subconsciously that behavior as a standard expected relationship outcome to cope with what's happening in their household. But children of unfaithful parents, interestingly enough, do not explicitly approve of cheating. It's completely subconscious. And when surveyed, they state that they believe infidelity is wrong at the exact same rates as everyone else. Let's talk about personality next. The single largest negative predictor, so protective factor against cheating, is agreeable and conscientiousness. So you would see these traits in a partner manifest as being compassionate, easygoing, reliable, committed, laid back, and a good listener. Individuals who score high in these traits have brain architecture that is fundamentally wired to respect long-term commitment and process empathy of their partner's pain. On the other hand, predictive models flag individuals who score high in surgency. So surgency is the psychological term for a partner who has high perceived mate value, they're magnetic, they're extroverted, they're socially dominant, they're ambitious, and they crave novelty and status. They might be the most charming person at work. They probably have a lot of connections and a big network, and they really want to advance their social and career goals. They're usually really competitive, whether that's in sports or in their careers, and motivated by outward success like money or public awards or having elite social circles, being friends with people who are very wealthy. They usually love to travel, love to take trips, jump into new hobbies or ventures, and they also expect a lot from their environment and their partners. So pair this surgency with any of the traits from what's called the dark triad, which is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, and the risk of cheating skyrockets. So I hear you saying, well, my partner isn't a psychopath, and what the heck is Machiavellianism? So let me help us look into this. I will skip explaining narcissism because everybody knows what that is. Machiavellian partners basically view life and relationships as chess games. They're very skeptical, very cynical. They prioritize power and personal achievement over emotional connection. Some things you'd see with a Machiavellian partner would be being really pleasant only to people who can offer them something, being selectively charming. They'll rewrite history to make you doubt your own sanity and memory. They might alter the narrative of an argument that you had until you find yourself apologizing for something they did. Sometimes they'll bring a third person into the equation, like an ex or a family member. They'll triangulate to make a dynamic where you feel compliant or even jealous. And they'll also work on ruining your reputation with friends or family, while on the other hand, pretending they support you. Psychopathy might also feel like a strong word, but I bet you don't realize how many psychopaths you'll encounter every day without realizing it if you apply the psychological clinical definition of psychopathy. Psychopathic partners lack a conscience. They basically struggle with emotional bonding, they possess low empathy, and are driven by a need for immediate gratification. You'll see things like chilling lack of emotion or a blank stare when you're crying or hurt. They'll engage in reckless behaviors without thinking. So they might enjoy speeding and driving dangerously, or substance abuse or gambling. And they will do those things even if it makes you uncomfortable. And they'll also lie about little things just to see if they can get away with it. And when they hurt you deeply, they will not understand why you expect an apology. Individuals with these traits essentially have a sense of entitlement that makes them believe that they're exempt from standard relationship rules, and that makes them much, much more likely to cheat. Attractiveness and the relative mate value gap also play a huge role in whether someone feels like they can cheat or not. Attractiveness dictates what evolutionary psychologists call a person's market value in the relationship pool. When an individual possesses high physical attractiveness, their perceived replacement options are higher, and that alters their risk calculation when deciding whether or not to cheat and put the relationship at risk. And so whenever you feel like you have more options available to you that would be better than what you already have, the grass is greener on the other side, that increases the chance of cheating. So behavioral scientists link this to what is called the mate switching hypothesis. For an attractive individual, an affair is used as an organic way to trade up to a partner with higher perceived resources or social capital. They are so confident in their own market value that the perceived cost of ruining their total relationship with their current partner is quite low, and that makes them much quicker to burn the old social contract down. When a partner internally sees their own social capital or physical attractiveness or earning potential even as significantly higher than their partner's, their statistical intention to commit infidelity increases exponentially. They view themselves as overperforming and therefore settling with their current partner. And that psychologically lowers the perceived cost of risking the relationship. And so they subconsciously believe they have infinite replacement options if the relationship collapses. One example of this that comes to mind is the influencer couple Rachel Martino and Leo Camacho. Leo met Rachel when he was still in a relationship with somebody named Sarah. During the time he was with Sarah, he lost a lot of weight, he got into really good shape, and then he met Rachel on a cruise ship when Sarah wasn't there at a work event, which we will be coming back later to how work plays into whether somebody or not cheats. And the rest is history. They got together and he cheated with her and now they're in a relationship, and she actually has like millions of followers online who totally idolize their relationship, and I don't think those people realize that they got together by cheating. But anyways, my point being, as soon as Leo felt like his physical attractiveness, his social capital, and his earning potential was higher than his old partner Sarah's, he felt like he was able to go and find a woman who he felt better matched his level of physical attractiveness and earning capacity than Sarah did. Now, does your partner follow lots of girls or men in their age range on social media and scrolls through their photo a minute more than you would prefer? Or maybe you're out at the store and you catch their eyes lingering on someone who you know they probably think is attractive, but they linger for a little bit too long. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology measured something called attentional disengagement in milliseconds. The researchers found that individuals who subconsciously pulled their eyes away from an attractive stranger just a few hundred milliseconds faster than the average baseline were 50% less likely to ever cheat. So if your partner's gaze lingers on alternative options, either out at a bar or on social media for even a split second too long, you might want to go ahead and keep an eye out and just know that their risk of infidelity is a little bit higher. Let's jump into attachment style. You need to know that attachment styles play a huge role in whether someone will cheat or not. Couples with an anxious avoidant dynamic have the highest infidelity rates. When the avoidant partner cheats, they do it to create space and emotional distance to avoid getting into any deep emotional conflict with their partner. And when the anxious partner cheats, it's a form of protest behavior to get revenge for feeling abandoned. Research from the University of Montreal tracked the motives behind avoidant infidelity and found that for these individuals, cheating functions almost as emotional regulation. It isn't really about seeking a new relationship. It's just about sabotaging their current one so they feel like they have more emotional distance and can breathe a little bit. And an affair is certainly one quick way to create some distance. By introducing a third party into the equation, they dilute the intensity of the bond they had with their partner and kind of are able to get a taste of this illusion of independence again. A series of 8 independent studies published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrated that avoidant attachment predicts a high interest in romantic alternatives and permissive attitudes towards cheating. The data showed that this is mediated by a low baseline of relationship commitment. So when avoidant individuals keep one foot out the door to protect themselves from getting hurt and one foot in the door because they're afraid of leaving, they lack the commitment-inspired inhibition that normally stops someone from acting on an outside temptation, and that is the exact moment where they decide to cheat. An anxiously attached person operates under a chronic terror of abandonment and emotional need that's not being filled. They are hyper attuned to their partner's emotional temperature, and when paired with an avoidant partner who retreats away under stress, they go into panic. And often what they'll do is they'll engage in protest behavior, which is a destructive action taken to force a response from a partner that they can no longer get to re-engage. So when they feel like their checked out avoidant partner is ignoring crying or arguments, what they do is they will cross the line into an affair. On a subconscious level, it's usually a high-stakes move to provoke a reaction where they're attempting to make the avoidant partner jealous enough to finally break their silence and fight for the relationship. In community and marital tracking studies, such as research done by Bogart and Sadava, attachment anxiety was positively associated with a higher frequency of affairs, particularly when the individual felt emotionally starved. When the avoidant partner checks out, the anxious partner often experiences this hollow void inside, and they'll lean into infidelity not only because they want to leave, but because their self-esteem is flattening. They use an alternative partner as a psychological patch to prove that they're still desirable and worthy of attention. At the end of the day, when it comes to attachment, finding out about your partner's infidelity in an anxious avoidant relationship ends up validating both of the partner's deepest, most toxic core beliefs. When an avoidant partner gets cheated on by their anxious partner, they will think, I knew it was never safe to trust someone with my emotions. I'm just going to lock down and withdraw forever. Whereas when an anxious partner finds out that they've been cheated on by their avoidant partner, they think, I knew I was inherently unlovable and destined to be abandoned. And it just exacerbates their cycle of relationship panic. Without conscious intervention and intense internal work, if you have this dynamic in your relationship, you are setting yourself up for infidelity. Age and phase of life are very much associated with the likelihood to cheat. Large-scale sociological data collected via national sex surveys indicates that both men and women experience a spike in thoughts of infidelity and cheating around the 7th year of a marriage or long-term partnership. And people have named this the 7-year itch. This aligns with census metrics showing that the average marriage duration prior to divorce is around 8 years, and a lot of times that is correlated with infidelity from year 7. While both sexes experience the year 7 spike in cheating, for women, after that year, the rates of cheating will decrease, and for men, it is all over the place. So it'll drop a little bit after year 7, and then it'll climb again around year 18. And then once they've been in the marriage for 30 or more years, they have the highest chances of committing infidelity. Let's break this down by age. So from ages 20 to 29, 10% of men cheat and 11% of women cheat. From 30 to 39, men, 14% of them cheat, women, 11%. And 30 to 39 is when we begin to see young children or early parenthood, or for a lot of people, especially these days, major career building. 40 to 49, both genders experience an upward tick in cheating. Especially men go from 14 to 16 to 18%, and women go from 11 to 13 to 14%. Between ages 40 and 49, cheating becomes a lot more common. So men, between 16 to 18% of them cheat, and women, 13 to 14% of them cheat. This really correlates heavily with the 7 to 10 year marriage fatigue marks that people experience, and also the onset of midlife identity crises. Careers are often at their highest pressure point. People are earning the most money, the most time in the workplace, and the workplace, as we'll talk about later, is the #1 breeding ground for affairs. Now, 50 to 59 is the worst age window for female infidelity, but also the time when men start to accelerate with cheating too. So women reach their peak infidelity rate at around 15 to 17% here, where men go to 22%, but the men keep ticking up. Ages 60 to 69, 24% of men cheat, while women, it's the same rate. And men's rates continue to climb all the way until they die, pretty much. Now, if you're pregnant or have kids, this changes the math too. This will really compound the likelihood of cheating in your relationship. Clinical data shows that pregnancy is one of the highest risk times for cheating, which feels so messed up. Longitudinal couples research and clinical surveys show that a partner is 2 to 3 times more likely to commit an act of infidelity during a pregnancy than a standard non-pregnant year of the relationship. So if a partner's baseline risk of cheating sits around 3 to 4% in a stable relationship, the probability can climb up to 15% during the 9 months of gestation. Again, that's baseline. If your partner had any of the traits we talked about before in this podcast, this percentage would be a lot higher based off of their baseline percentage with their other risk factors. The closer the pregnancy timeline gets towards the end, the more likely the cheating. The statistical likelihood of an affair increases by roughly 35% moving into the second trimester and an additional 40% by the third trimester. Psychologists say that this is because of an intimacy deficit, where the partner will struggle to view their pregnant partner as a sexual being, and there are some threats to the ego as the household focus shifts entirely to the child and less around the partnership and the marriage, and specifically the man. Once the baby arrives, the risk does not get better. The Gottmans found that 67% of couples experience a severe drop in relationship satisfaction within the first 3 years of a child's life, particularly within the first 12 months. The transition from having 0 children to 1 child is the most volatile period for infidelity in the parenting life cycle. This is when the baseline risk of cheating shifts an additional 10 to 14%, especially during the immediate 12 months postpartum. So you can see all of this risk is compiling on top of each other. The dramatic drop in physical intimacy during this time, combined with emotional distance and sleep deprivation, is a recipe for disaster. Interestingly, the more children you have, the less likely cheating is to happen, particularly once you hit 3, 4, or more children. This actually usually indicates that the couple holds more traditional values and a really solid, stable relationship. And so first of all, if you were in an unsteady relationship, you probably won't have that many kids anyways. And secondly, leaving that relationship, risking it by cheating, becomes much more costly when you have a lot of kids on the line than if you just have one child. The question you are all waiting for is, who's my partner going to cheat with if they cheat? And I am going to tell you that as of today, 60 to 85% of all affairs are from the workplace. So that trope you see in the movies, on TV, it's very, very true. The workplace is the number one place that people will meet and have affairs. And this is because they share mutual high-stress goals. They're working towards a common goal. They have a built-in common interest. They spend a lot of time of the week together, and they see each other at their professional best when they're on their nicest behavior. Now, second place that affairs happen the most is DMs and social media. Somebody might reconnect with an old ex or slide into somebody's DMs. And so this kind of lowers the barrier into cheating and makes it feel less bad than it is when it's over messaging and not in real life. And so that's why DMs are really becoming a more popular spot for cheating to begin. The least likely place, but still a possibility, 10 to 15% of affairs occur with neighbors or mutual friends or acquaintances. And so this is not the most common option because it's also the one that requires the highest cost if caught. Money. Would you guess that money can be a predictor of cheating? Dr. Kristen L. Munch at the University of Connecticut found that financial inequality heavily skews cheating. Men are least likely to cheat when they bring home exactly 70% of the household income. Any move above or below that mark increases the chance of cheating. 18% of men in top-tier executive roles report extramarital sex. And this is because of 3 variables. There's constant corporate travel. And when a man constantly travels for business or goes out of town for business, 62% of them admit to having an affair. Having a high amount of disposable income also puts these men at a higher risk of cheating as well. And then, of course, their ego of having that position at work makes them feel entitled to bypass standard moral ideals. Other high-risk fields would be like manual trades, where workers have total autonomy and unaccountable hours, and so it's easier for them to lie about where they are. And interestingly, for females cheating, medical fields are the most common place where women cheat, and people will say it's about stress bonding, and because medical professionals will share life and death trauma or exhaustion or mood swings, they go through these environments that spouses at home can really never understand, and combining that with the 12 to 16 hour shifts, you have the perfect cover for an affair. So let's get into motivators that cause somebody to cheat. The taxonomy of 8 distinct motivations for cheating comes from a study titled Motivations for Extradyadic Infidelity Revisited. The research was primarily led by data scientists and psychologists at the University of Maryland College Park and collaborators from Indiana University and the University of Utah. They surveyed 500 adults who admitted to cheating in past or current relationships. They analyzed their confessions and they took evaluations, and they used an algorithm to isolate these 8 behavioral pillars that proved that relationship deficits and internal psychological coping mechanisms and patterns were much more predictive of an affair than just physical attraction. The first predictor was anger or revenge, seeking retribution for a partner's betrayal or coldness or control. A lack of love was the second one, so feeling emotionally bankrupt when you've fallen out of love and feel no affection for your partner anymore. Neglect. Feeling a lack of emotional warmth or respect or focused attention from your spouse. Low commitment, which you are just not good at establishing structural long-term boundaries. You aren't good at speaking up for what you need, and that's what causes you to cheat. Situational risks. This is what we've covered up until now in the podcast: having kids, going through a stressful time at work, your age, the amount of income you make. Another factor can be if a partner is dealing with substance use, or if you are temporarily traveling or isolated. That is all considered a risk for cheating. Self-esteem deficits. If a partner has a need for external validation because of insecurities. Sexual dissatisfaction, meaning that between the two partners, there is a misalignment in physical intimacy or desire to explore preferences that can't be fulfilled with your current partner. And lastly is novelty, which is simply the fact that I need a dopamine hit. I have an impulse to go and seek something outside of my stable routine. What happens when this truth finally comes out? Well, according to institutions like the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, 60 to 75% of couples actually choose to stay together initially following infidelity, whereas closer to 25% split immediately. Clinical tracking shows that in the long term, after 3 to 5 years, couples who stay together after infidelity actually have an extremely high attrition rate. Long-term survival drops to 50-ish%. So the reason is because most of the couples who stay in a relationship after an affair don't really rebuild. They just fall back into the pattern of their life as it was before, which is ongoing resentment, ongoing lies, and eventually it just collapses anyways. And studies show as well that couples who do not divorce after infidelity are pretty deeply unhappy. They live kind of as roommates, and they score exceptionally high for contempt and passive-aggressive stonewalling. They are functionally separated but kind of locked into the same house, especially when they have kids. Interestingly enough, there are two groups of people who come out of an affair and end up scoring much higher for levels of personal happiness, peace, and self-esteem. The two groups are the ones who split immediately after the cheating. Immediately after they found out that the partner cheated, they left the relationship, they cut things off, and they went and rebuilt their life. So after the 2-year mark, that's the first group that reported much higher levels of happiness, peace, and self-esteem. The other group, and I will repeat, this is the rarest outcome. The small percentage of couples who do complete trauma-informed therapy with a very experienced marriage and family therapist do end up rating their long-term relationship satisfaction identical to or even higher than couples who never experienced infidelity. They are genuinely happy, but they are the tiniest minority. So I want to end with this quote from Esther Perel. Esther Perel is a Belgian psychotherapist, and she is a New York Times bestselling author of a book called The State of Affairs: Rethinking Infidelity. Perel argues that human relationships are way too complex for these machine learning models that I've mentioned before, and instead of looking at risk as a checklist of flaws or a bunch of numbers, she looks at existential longings and dualities. She pushes back against the traditional symptom theory of relationship science, which is this idea that an affair is always a symptom of a broken relationship or a broken person, by pointing out people cheat even in highly satisfying and happy relationships. And so assessing risk can't be a matter of just checking if a couple is fighting or if they're unhappy. The risk really does come from an internal individual crisis and often serves as a psychological rebellion against domestic responsibility, stagnation, aging, life changes. It happens during a desperate attempt to reconnect with a lost, autonomous version of the self. Being unhappy in your relationship can also be a symptom of what I mentioned earlier, which is domestic responsibility, life changes, illness. All of these things might spur an affair as an attempt to reconnect with the former, more powerful, autonomous version of yourself. The quote is, "Our partners do not belong to us. They are only on loan with an option to renew." I love the way that she emphasizes that assuming a relationship is automatically safe is actually one of the biggest risks for cheating. You are assuming just because a commitment or a vow that your partner is always going to be yours, and not realizing that you can actually lose them is what causes complacency. So acknowledging the permanent elusiveness of your partner, that they can leave at any time and that they are choosing every day to be with you, is really what keeps the emotional and sexual dimensions of your relationship alive. If cheating does happen, your best way to happiness is to end it immediately or commit to completing intense trauma-informed therapy from beginning to end with a very high-quality therapist. One last time, our partners do not belong to us. They are only on loan with an option to renew. Thank you for listening to this special episode of Do You Want to Hear Something Awful? I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode that was a little bit more psychology related than it was true crime and documentary related. I'd love to keep doing these episodes where I talk about something psychological that corresponds to some themes from my previous episodes. So if you want more episodes like this, leave me a comment below. How did I do explaining everything? Did you like it? Give us a rating. You can follow us on social media at Something Awful Pod. Check out our YouTube, check out our Instagram, our threads, and check in with us again if you want to hear more awful things. And we will see you next time.